Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Wood with Early Music America. I'm the Special Projects Manager, and we want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for another of our Monday interest sessions. You can find this and previous sessions on the EMA website under the online interest session menu item under what EMA does, and we will have several other weeks coming up. We'll be sending out the announcement tomorrow with our e-newsletter, e-notes about the next 2 weeks with Dorian Bandy next week, and then the week after that, Elizabeth Weinfield. And we're excited to present these interest sessions along with today's with Andrew Schultze. And in a few minutes, I'll hand it off to Andrew. For those of you joining us via Zoom, you can feel free to use the Q&A function, which is in the menu bar. You can click Q&A, and then in there you can type in your questions. And toward the end, we'll save time and we'll go through the open questions and see what we can answer there. This video will also be shared on our YouTube channel by later today, along with our other previous webinars, so that you can view this and other ones at your leisure. If you have a problem and you are joining us via Zoom and you need a little bit of help, you can use the chat function, and you can send me a private chat during the presentation, and I will do what I can to help you through that time. And if you're otherwise having any general questions or anything, you can also put those in the chat, but it's best to use the Q&A function for that. Just a few things as we get going here. I'd also like to invite you to visit earlymusicamerica.org and contribute to the relief fund. That is now over $75,000 money going toward early musicians in need during this COVID-19 pandemic. We have already helped more than 300 musicians through the fund, and we want to thank everyone who has contributed. And if you have the ability to contribute, there are musicians out there who would be very grateful, and of course EMA is also very grateful. You can find out about our interest sessions, other things that EMA is doing. We also share lots of news from around the early music community by finding us on our various social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you want to get the weekly newsletter that includes news from EMA as well as from around the early music community, you can either send a text to 42828 with the words early music, that's all together, early music, or you can use the button at the bottom of earlymusicamerica.org to add your name to that mailing list. And we generally send that out on Tuesdays. And occasionally during this global health crisis, we have been sending an occasional Friday update when resources change quickly, and we want to draw your attention to that. But in general, we try to keep those only to Tuesdays so that your already full inboxes don't become overwhelmed. So once again, I want to thank and welcome our presenter today, Andrew Schultze, who will be speaking about the development of the Trill. And Andrew recently presented this same talk to the Central, is it Central Nats? Is that correct?
Yeah, the Central Region National Association of Teachers of Singing Conference in Iowa City.
And that was last November.
Yes.
And we're very happy to be able to present this here. Before we get started, if you, anyone who's joining us, feel free to put in where you're joining us from. And if you're watching on Facebook, put that in the comments, just the city and state or province that you're joining us from. We'd love to see where everyone is watching from. So without any more from me, I will turn this over to Andrew.
Okay, thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Schultze, and today it will be my distinct pleasure to speak with you about the origin and performance of the vocal trill. I would like to dedicate today's presentation to the memory of the late Raymond Lepard, who passed away aged 92 some 6 months ago on October 22nd, 2019. And as was mentioned, my first talk on this topic was for singers. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a talk that also is more perhaps for singers to hear. I'm going to start with talking about the requirement of the trill and 18th century trills, just for a moment, just to set the stage. Let me say that the ability to perform a vocal trill is a requirement for all singers of all voice categories. And we singers are most familiar with the performance of the 18th century trill, and we use it when we sing the works of Bach, Handel, and Mozart. However, the performance of the trill in the early 17th century is a conundrum. It is often referred to as a Trillo, and many of us are unsure how it may differ from the 18th century trill. Some may feel that its suggested execution conflicts with bel canto principles as espoused by our voice teachers and vocal mentors. So first, what is bel canto? Bel canto, or beautiful singing, according to the New Harvard Dictionary of Music, is a manner of singing that developed in the 17th century. It meant not only good tone production and flexibility of voice, but also the ability of the singer to incorporate tasteful and artistic ornaments that would both flatter the characteristic traits of his or her voice and enhance the expressivity of the piece performed. To this definition, I will add these remarks from Francesco Rognoni's 1620 vocal tutor, La Selva dei Varie Passaggi. Rognoni writes, "The beauty of singing primarily consists in the expression and distinct pronunciation of the words, using various ornaments, decrescendos and crescendos to conform to the meaning of the text." So I would like to start with an example of an 18th century trill as found in a cadenza in a work you might be familiar with. It goes like this. The crooked straight and the rough places plain. Yes, that is the cadenza from Handel's conducting score of the Messiah for the tenor aria, "Every Valley Shall Be Exalted." I hope that you are all familiar with that. If not, see what you can do to find that music. Now, my research concerning the origin of the vocal trill and its performance has taken me all the way back to the early decades of the 16th century. I was not expecting that. I discovered on the journey many neglected but illuminating treatises about vocal and instrumental performance practices, written in Spanish, Italian, German, French, and English, many of which are now magically available online. These treatises are instruction manuals, which aim to help the performer in the development of practical skills, such as using dynamic contrasts, creating improvised coloratura, and learning how to sing a trill. I would like to call your attention to the contemporary 17th century dictionaries that I also consulted in my research, especially John Florio's Italian-English dictionary, Queen Anna's New World of Words, published in London in 1611. And then there's Levinus Hulsius's trilingual German-French-Italian Dictionarium, published in Frankfurt in 1616. John Minshaw's Dictionary in Spanish and English, published in London in 1599, and Lorenzo Franciosini's Vocabolario Italiano e Spagnolo, first published in Rome in 1621. All of these dictionaries are also available online. So, The first mention of the vocal trill that I discovered comes from Luis de Milan's 1536 collection, The Master or Music for the Vihuela. It was published in Valencia, Spain, and he writes, "This Italian madrigal should be sung with rejoicing, and the singer, where appropriate, should ornament it with a trill, or as they say, trinar it." Now, trinar is the modern Spanish verb to trill. Milan further instructs us that certain other Portuguese and Spanish language villancicos and other Italian language madrigals in his collection should be ornamented with garganta, writing el cantar puede hacer garganta. And this phrase, hacer, to have, garganta, throat, is defined as when a singer sings sweetly and smoothly when making passage work and vocal ornaments, while gargantear itself as a verb is to quaver or warble with the voice. Now, the earliest Italian source for the vocal trill and its cousin, the groppo, is Giovanni Luca Conforto's short and easy method to learn how to sing passage work, published in Rome in 1593. So, let us turn to musical example 1 on my sheet of musical examples, please, where I'm hoping that you will see Conforto's Trillo with a concluding turn. Oh, there it is. Yes, it was the handwritten sheet just a second ago. Musical example 1 from slide 1.
One moment.
Okay.
Moment.
There it is. Musical example 1, Conforto's Trillo, which has a concluding turn in it. I'll sing it for you. It goes like this. That is his version of the Trillo. So I'll continue to speak. We'll come back and see example number 2 in a moment. Now, Florio, in his dictionary, defines the Trillo as to quaver or warble in singing. And its relation, the groppo, is a knot, a node, or a bunch. Conforto's Trillo, as you heard, is somehow prepared by the upper neighbor. Let's talk about Giovanni Bovicelli. He was active as a singer in Rome and Milan, and his rules for learning how to perform passage work, published in 1594, includes written out coloratura for motets and madrigals by Palestrina, De Rore, Victoria, and others. The tremolo he describes as, quote, not less or more than a shaking, a tremar of the voice on one note, which he indicates with the upside down V symbol. So, how is tremolo different from the trill? Indeed, that is a good question, which we will address later. But now, it's time to explore some more or less modern definitions of the trill and to bring Giulio Caccini into our discussion. We will begin with Victorian definitions of the trill from a Dictionary of Music and Musicians published by Sir George Grove in 1890. He writes, the trill is an ornament consisting of the rapid alternation of a note with its major or minor second. The ornament itself dates from the end of the 16th century, and it is described in Le Nuove Musiche, the new music, by Giulio Caccini, under the name of gruppo, a name now used to express a turn-like group of 4 notes. Now, Caccini also uses the term trillo, says George Grove, but as indicating a rapid repetition of a single note, an effect expressed in modern terminology as vibrato, which is an Italian term denoting an effect something akin to a tremolo. All right, let us return to slide 1, please, and look at musical example 2. There it is, Giulio Caccini. There we see Caccini's Trillo and his Gruppo. I will do my best to sing both of these examples. Here is his Trillo. Oh, oh, oh. Here is his Gruppo. Oh. Okay, they don't sound like they're the same. They sound like they're somewhat different. Grove continues, and you can come back to look at my face now again. He says that vibrato and tremolo are almost equally reprehensible as vocal mannerisms. Mannerisms express nothing but carelessness or self-sufficiency, here meaning haughtiness and overbearance. And the constant tremolo and vibrato are therefore nauseous in the extreme. There may be some people who are listening who will agree with that assessment. Now, the classic 20th century definition of the vocal trill echoes some of what is in the 1890 Grove. It is found in the Harvard Dictionary of Music, 1944, edited by Willy Appel, who writes, "The trill is a musical ornament consisting of the rapid alternation of a given note with its diatonic second. In the early 17th century, the vocal tremolo was widely used and called a trillo. It was usually written out in quick notes. During this time, the term tremolo meant trill." All right. Moving from the theoretical to the practical, musicologists, singers, and conductors, including Raymond Lepard, attempted to recreate the performance of the vocal trillo according to the accepted definition, that is, as a repetition of one note, citing Caccini's written out version of the Trillo as their source. But some, like Robert Donington, found this not to be so good. Donington says that the definition that his contemporaries have come up with, the execution of their vocal trill, is problematic. And he writes in his 1989 new version of the interpretation of music that, quote, "We have a difficulty with the early Baroque trill. It is common today, as for example, in Raymond Lepard's mainly excellent performances of Monteverdi and Cavalli operas, to caricature the trillo by repeating the same note with exaggerated emphasis and a strongly measured rhythm. Caccini describes it, the trill, as a thing written in one way, but sung another for more grace and refinement." End quote. So I will call the ungraceful, strongly measured, single note repetitive performance of the vocal trill Donington's caricature. Now, unfortunately, this caricature has been championed into the 21st century by important, well-respected, and influential scholars and performers, including H. Wiley Hitchcock, Carol McClintock, Nigel Rogers, Ellen Harris, John Walter Hill, and John Elliott Gardner. Nigel Rogers, in his article, Voices, in the Companion to Baroque Music, writes, quote, "The trillo was almost certainly performed by glottal articulation. Glottal articulation is a rapid spasm of the muscles controlling the larynx, causing the glottis to open and close in rapid oscillation, similar to coughing or laughing, ha 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 ha, but less violent. Some scholars have misleadingly described the trillo as controlled vibrato, and Rogers cites Howard Mayer Brown particularly as one of them. But, he continues, since the technique of glottal articulation serves equally well for the execution of rapid passaggi, it is likely it was used for both. I have demonstrated to my own satisfaction, Nigel Rogers says, that this can be a convincing way of performing these very demanding gorge, the gurglings, and it would be difficult to imagine how one could perform passaggi with an articulation produced by controlled vibrato. Well, we'll see about that. Now, I am not inclined to be satisfied nor convinced by Mr. Rogers' testimonial, but in the past, I must admit, I attempted to use some of his ideas. But perhaps the most specific definition of the 20th century caricature Trillo is found in the book Baroque Music, Music in Western Europe, 1580 to 1750 by John Walter Hill, published in 2005. On page 37, in a box entitled Performance of Monody, Dr. Hill writes, quote, Caccini gives many indications in the prefaces of his two books of monody, and now these would be Le Nuove Musiche, and that's from 1602, and the 1614 Nuove Musiche e Nuova Maniera di Scriverle. But he places particular emphasis, says Dr. Hill, on the articulation of notes in very rapid ornamental passages. The key to all passage work, he says, is the Trillo, which consists of very rapid reiterations of the same pitch, each repetition articulated by a light glottal stop. Ah. Now, what Caccini wrote concerning the trill was a bit more complicated than Dr. Hill implies. For example, Caccini writes that the singer is to restrike each note in the gola, that is the throat or esophagus, on the vowel ah, which is pronounced in Italian somewhere between the sounds in the word law and the word father, and not unlike the first syllable in the word Boston. More will be revealed later. But first, in counterpoise, I will quote Ludovico Zacconi in volume 1 of his Pratica Musica, published in Venice in 1596. That's 6 years before the appearance of Le Nuove Musiche. And Zacconi writes, it's the tremolo, which is the quavering or warbling voice, which is the true entryway into the making of passage work and in the learning of embellishments. Just as a ship will be easier to float when there is first a push, just as when there is first a desire to move before there is a motion, or as before the dancer leaps, he prepares to leap. This tremolo must be brief and gracefully beauteous, because the overeager and forced ones are wearisome and cloying. And by its very nature, those who use it, the tremolo, come to employ it continuously, and it becomes a habit. This continuous motion of the voice aids and promotes the articulation of other ornaments of the gorgia, and wonderfully facilitates the acquisition of the ability to perform vocal passage work, or coloratura. Dr. Hill continues, all of the notes of the ornamental melismas must be articulated in exactly that manner. For him, that's glottally. These melismas contain many 16th notes and even some 32nd notes to be sung at the tempo of around 1/4 note equals 120. Oh boy. But if we carefully read what Caccini writes about the Trillo in the preface to Le Nuove Musiche, we would learn that Caccini's notation of the Trillo, that is, as an accelerating single pitch, was his method for teaching members of his family how to trill, and is indeed not indicative of the performance of the ornament. Caccini writes, learning how to sing the Trillo is a necessary step in attaining that grace most sought after in good singing. Yet, as notated above, as repetition of one pitch, Caccini writes, it gives a result opposite of what is intended. Now, I will spend a little bit more time with Caccini, and I will sing some excerpts for you from the ornamented version of the madrigal Cor mio de non languire, from the preface to Caccini's 1602 New Music, Le Nuove Musiche. The translation of the words are, "My heart, do not languish, I depart. Listen for several trills and gruppos and a sprinkling of sprezzatura. Cor mio de non languire, Fortunately for us, an earlier definition of the Trillo and its relation, the gruppo, is found in the preface to the sacred opera La Rappresentazione di Anima e Corpo, the play or representation of the soul and body, composed in 1600 by Emilio del Cavaliere, who was Caccini's previous boss at the Florentine court. In the preface to the full score of the work, Alessandro Guidotti writes, quote, "In the singer's parts, you will sometimes find the letters G, M, T, or Z, which indicates the performance of certain ornaments. So let us go to slide 2, please, and see musical example 3. That will show us Cavalieri's Groppolo and Trillo, which I will sing for you. Notice he shows us a preparation, and it goes like this. Here's his Groppolo. Oh, oh, and his Trillo. Oh, oh. Note that for Cavaliere, the Trillo is a fluctuation between 2 pitches. You can show my face back again now too. And that his Groppolo concludes with a turn. Emilio del Cavaliere was recognized by his contemporaries and later 17th and 18th century music historians as a creator of the later 17th and 18th century music and theatrical styles. Jacopo Peri writes, "Before any other whom I know, Cavaliere enabled us with marvelous invention to hear our kind of music on the stage. Cavaliere was, after all, the superintendent of the arts and director of music in Florence from 1588 until 1600. What a critical time, 1588 until 1600. That he died in 1602. That he premiered his operatic Capo Lavoro in Rome rather than in Florence. That his theatrical drama is on a religious subject, and that most of his music composed in Florence is lost, has led, I believe, to a conventional 20th century opinion of Cavaliere, which marginalizes him and belittles his importance in the development of early Baroque opera and performance practices. Cavaliere's 2-pitch Trillo and 2-pitch Groppolo have been utterly omitted from our discussion about the ornament. One 20th century musicologist, in an article in the October 1976 National Association of Teachers of Singing Bulletin, proclaimed that Cavaliere, quote, misuses the term Trillo, end quote. And she later eliminated it and his Groppolo and other of his ornaments from her published English translation of the preface to La Rappresentazione di Anima e Corpo. A shameful, shameful deed. Now, Francesco Rognoni a name that you may or may not be familiar with, but in the preface to his monumental Forest of Varying Passage work, compiled in 1620, writes out both simple and double groppos, 3 different versions of the Trillo, as well as examples of several other ornaments of interest. He explains, and this is important, that he has written out the gruppo and the Trillo in the manner, in the way that the majority of his worthy colleagues have come to notate these ornaments, implying that their performance is not as written out. As his trills are notated as Donington caricatures, are we to understand that the caricature is but a symbolic representation of the trill? Well, why not? I think so. Then let us call this important realization the Rognoni clarification. Rognoni also writes, there are some who sing their ornaments in the Peloponnesian style, articulating their embellishments in a manner which displeases all who hear it. They sing ah in a way which seems as though they are laughing, showing us how many teeth they have in their mouths. And from them we learn that ornaments should originate in the petto, that is, in the chest, and not in the gola, the throat. Claudio Monteverdi writes concerning the demerits of the singer Bisucci that his ornaments, gorgia, are not well defined because he does not join the chest voice, the vocale del petto, to that of the throat. Monteverdi continues, if the throat is lacking from the chest, the ornaments, the gorgia, become crude, hard, and offensive. And if the chest is lacking from the throat, from the gola, the ornaments become ungraceful and almost continuous in the voice. But when both are functioning together, the ornaments are pleasant and clear and most natural. I will now sing for you some of Rognoni's version of these ornaments, such as the simple gruppo, the tremolo in the value of a whole note, and the trill in the value of a whole note. And then we will continue. So if we can move now again to slide number 2 and look at, no, I'm sorry, my mistake. There are no examples. There are no examples. I have to sing them. So these are the examples from Francesco Rognoni of these ornaments. First, the simple gruppo. It goes like this. We would call those simple turns, perhaps. Here is his tremolo on the value of the whole note. That's the tremolo. Now, the trillo on the whole note. Now, we'll spend some time looking at some pictures in a moment, because I'd like to show you something about what good singing looked like, especially in Rome, in 3 paintings executed between 1625 and 1636 by 3 Caravagist realist painters. So if we can go, please, to slide number 3. There it is. It's a concerto or concertino with a clavichord player, a little bit of a concert with a clavichordist. And this is a detail from this picture. Note the position of the singer's head, mouth, and throat. Notice that it conforms to a certain Italian ideal called the aperto coperto. Aperto means something that is open, and coperto means something that is closed. So an Italian kind of proverb would be that when you sing, you have to have an aperto coperto and a coperto aperto. And what it means, I think if you look at this young gentleman, that his throat is open. That's the aperto. And that his mouth with his lip moving downward, that is the coperto. And when you mix these two positioning things together, you get something that is the best position for singing, this aperto, coperto. Let us look now at slide number 4. It's called A Concert with 5 Performers, and this is a detail, and it's by the painter Pietro Paolini, and it is from around 1625. So if you look closely, I think you can tell that the singer is revealing to us some of his or her teeth. But note, there is no extraneous tension anywhere else in the face or in her neck, and we still have that feeling of aperto, caperto. Additionally, as in the previous picture, we have a very clear view of her tongue. Her tongue is very, very far forward, maybe even more than just behind her back, her front teeth. Maybe it's even a little bit on top of her front teeth. So that's Mr. Paolini's view. And finally, yes, this is slide number 5, and we have here the concert, and this is a detail. And what I like about this is that we see a absolutely naturalistic and realistic position of what life looks like when you're performing in concert. See, there's the guy playing the cornetto in the background, the harpsichordist, and then we have these 2 singers. And one guy, the older guy, look at that face. It is so relaxed. And look, he has no extraneous lip or any kind of tension in his face. Rather, it looks like he's maybe keeping time and perhaps looking over the shoulder of the other singer to find his place in the music. It's very natural, it's very realistic, and it is so relaxed. The young gentleman at the bottom, he looks a little bit askew. Maybe he's trying to spend too much time looking at his music because he's tilting a little bit to the left. But I think these 3 pictures show us what life was like in real concert singing and what it was like to have that more relaxed and aperto, coperto positioning. Okay, you can come back to me because I'm going to talk a little bit now as we're approaching the ending of my presentation. Let me just tell you about the extensive ornamentation that you find in Orpheus's solo, Possente Spirito, from Act 3 of Monteverdi's opera L'Orfeo. I bet many people who are listening are familiar with this piece. And it has been suggested to me many years ago that perhaps those embellishments may not have come from the pen of Monteverdi, but rather from the throat of the first singer to perform the role of Orpheus. That would be Giulio Caccini's pupil, Francesco Rasi. The 1609 published full score of Monteverdi's L'Orfeo is available online, and Orpheus's immense solo of Possente Spirito, in both plain and embellished versions, is found on pages 55 to 64 of that full score, and it is well worth a look. I'm going to move a little bit ahead and tell you a little bit about Giovanni Felice Sanchez and his book of solo motets from 1638, where his trills are indicated in the book by the T sign and often implied by Donington caricatures. So I will sing an excerpt for you from Giovanni Felice Sanchez's setting of Psalm 92 for bass and continuo. The text, I will be glad. Exultabo, exultabo, exultabo. All of those trills are indicated by Donington caricatures, so I have decided to interpret them that way, and I did add my own little cadence at the end with another one of those trills. What is interesting is that when you look at a lot of the music published by Monteverdi during this time, you will see that he indicates the trill with a Donington caricature, which has led to a lot of confusion of people trying to their way through the works of Monteverdi. But I would like to return to the tremolo and Trillo question and seek out some conclusions. 16th and 17th century authors have special things to say about the tremolo. And here is what one of the earliest, Silvestro Ganassi, who flourished from 1492 till around 1557, this is what Ganassi writes about it in his 1535 recorder tutor, La Fontegara. He says, "The gracefulness most easily shown by demonstration of its effects is primarily that kind of gracefulness derived from the shaking of the finger over the whole of the recorder, from which one discovers that some pitches can shake and waver at intervals of a third more or less, and some of a whole tone, and others of a semitone. The sweetest and most pleasant is that at the interval of a half step more or less. Its effect has been described as vibrato-like in 2018 and 2019 communications with recordists Patricia Moorhead and the Austrian musicologist Dr. Ernst Kubitschek. Patricia Moorhead writes, "A tremolo on recorder during this time period is most often a flutter fingering above the actual note, which can sound more like a vibrato. There is certainly a slight pitch change with this type of fingering. The fingers move up and down just around the actual note to create this effect," end quote. Now, Ganassi supplies a table of 26 fingerings for these proto-tremo trills on the next page of his Fontegara. As fate would have it, we are so lucky today because our Early Music America host, David Simmons Wood, is a recordist, and I have prevailed upon him to play a Ganassi tremolo of his choosing for us. So David, are you ready to share?
Yes, with apologies to everyone else. So I've chosen one of these half steps that he has notated in Fontegara. So here is one of the half step trills as closely as possible to the writing here. That's one of the half step trills, and here's one of the larger that he calls vivace. So that's one of the larger ones. So those are a couple of the notated trill options in his trill chart there.
Okay, well, while we have you here, David, I'm going to ask you, why do you think that Ganassi included such an effect, so much of this tremolo stuff in his recorder tutor?
Well, I think it. I think it makes some sense that as we know, with many of the ornaments that they were, trying to replicate what was going on with other instruments and with other voices.
Okay.
Or maybe sometimes the opposite direction.
Well, I think you're on the right track, because I did a little research and I found that Ganassi suggests in 4 chapters of his book, in chapters 1, 13, 23, and 25 of La Fontegara, he says that the recorder players should imitate the singer. Now, he does not specifically identify this effect, this tremolo effect, as being derived from a vocal ornament per se. Now, I will also share with you that in his later 1542-43 2-volume pedagogical work for playing the viola da gamba, entitled The Regola Rubertina, Ganassi tells the player in chapter 2 on page 6 to shake the arm or move the finger on the fingerboard as he uses the bow to conform to the expression required by the music as based on the words of the text. He says the resulting wavering and quavering vibrato effects, will allow the performer to express emotions of joy or sadness. For the player must mimic an orator who changes the character of his voice to suit the text. So even instrumentalists are supposed to be getting into the words. Let me go back to Mr. Rognoni, who writes in 1620, "The tremolo is sung often, but with discretion, and it is necessary not to sing it as some do, bleating like little goats. Generally, it is performed in the value of a dot on each note. The tremolo, by its very nature, is an augmentation to the sound of the singing voice." Florio defines tremare as to quaver or warble with the voice. He also writes, "It is a stop in some instruments called the quavering or warbling stop. Such a warbling can be heard on organs equipped with the vox humana, that is, a human voice, or tremulant stop. And records indicate that organs in Spain, Italy, Burgundy, Holland, and Germany had such stops as early as the middle of the 16th century. 4 of the organs described by Michael Praetorius in volume 2 of the Syntagma Musicum have tremulants. In Naples, Fabio Colonna claimed to have built, around the year 1590, an hydraulic organ which imitated singing with garganta, with ornaments, and included a warbling rossignolo or nightingale stop. And as for information about plain old vibrato, let me call your attention to a close shake, as found in Christopher Simpson's Division Violist from London, 1659. Simpson writes, "A close shake is made when we shake a finger so gently and nicely as to make no variation of tone." He notates it, as you will see, as a fluctuation on one pitch, specifically as higher and lower aspects of the same note. So let us go to slide 2 again, please, David, and let us view example 4. There it is, a close shake. So I'm going to try to sing this for you. It may be difficult. I believe that I have just made a convincing case that vibrato and tremolo are indeed the same. So I'd like to have my face before the audience on that one, please. Moving ever onward and upward, let's do a survey of some 17th century German tutors, which were heavily influenced by Italian vocal method books. And they borrow liberally from Caccini, Bovie, and Rognoni. Michael Schultze, or perhaps Schultze, is better known by his Latinized version of his last name, Praetorius. And in his Syntagma Musicum, or musical treatise of 1619, he writes, quote, "A singer must possess a pleasantly shaking and trembling voice, a smooth, round throat capable of making passage work, a steady and long breath, and the ability to sing a certain voice category with a full, bright sound." Daniel Friderici, in his book, Musical Ornamentation and Singing, from 1618, adds, "The singers should not sing through the nose, nor clench their teeth, nor should they let the voice, but they should let the voice, rather, gracefully quaver, shaking in the gutture, that is, in the throat and windpipe." Circa 1650, Heinrich Schultze's assistant, Christoph Bernhard, wrote about the trill. The trill is the most difficult but most ornamental of embellishments, and no one can be judged a good singer who does not know how to use it. One needs to learn it by listening. Above all, one should not alter the quality of the voice so that a goat-like bleat comes out. it is very pleasing to hear during the singing of a long trill, dynamic contrasts of forte and piano. The voice must be kept firm and steady, except where a trill or a passionate vocal effect is needed. The tremolo becomes a vice when used by older singers who do not employ it as an artistic effect, but have it slip out because they are unable to keep their voices steady. In other words, they wobble. Finally, let us consult some English sources. John Playford includes in his 1664 Introduction to the Skill of Music an English translation with musical examples of the preface to Caccini's 1602 Le Nuove Musiche, which is very interesting indeed, and is available online in its original and in 20th century editions of Strunk's Source Readings in Music History. But it is not the retelling of Caccini's book that is important. Rather, what is most informative is Playford's anecdote about learning how to trill. He tells us, quote, "For attaining the trill, the surest way is by imitation of those who are perfect in the same. Yet I have heard of some that attained it after this manner. In the singing of a plain song of 6 notes up and 6 notes down, they have in the midst of every note beat or shaked with their finger upon the throat, which by often practice they came to do the same notes exactly without the help of the finger." So I'm going to sing for you do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do with the help of the shaking finger. And let's see what comes out. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Very, very vibrato-y, I would suggest. In the 13th edition of The Skill of Music, 1697, we are offered a more modern method of attaining the trill. Playford writes, "The trill is the most principal grace of music and the most used. The directions for learning it is only this: to move your voice easily upon 2 notes. First move slowly and then faster by degrees, and you'll find it come to you with just a little practice." Something to try at home. Now it is time for my apotheosis. So I hope that the evidence I have presented concerning the origin and performance of the vocal trill demonstrates its connection to vocal resonance and vibrato. Perhaps we could think of the trill as emerging from vibrato, the 17th century tremolo being vibrato on 1 pitch, while the trill is vibrato on 2 pitches. That might be a way to conceptualize it. However, the trill's performance should not be confused with exercises used to develop the muscular coordination needed in order to perfect it. That brings us to the Donington caricature and back to the idea of that slow repetition of the trill that we find in other authors. Now, as the Anglo-American organist and vocal pedagogue Joseph Smith wrote in his book, Voice and Song, A Practical Method for the Study of Singing, in 1907, he says, "Commence each trill with a thorough inflation of the lungs. Retain the breath a moment, then attack and sing softly with the breath pressure perfectly controlled, constant and steady from first to last. The mouth must continue immovably open. The chin, lips, and tongue perfectly still." Sounds like aperto coperto to me. "Throughout the exercise, carefully maintain the characteristic quality of whatever vowel is in practice." Thank you, Mr. Smith, for those remarks. And thank you, Mr. Wood, and you, Early Music America, and the ladies and gentlemen in our audience for your kind attention. There may be some time left for some questions, and I'd be happy to do my best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, if anyone has questions, you can put those into the Q&A, or at this point, you could even use it, the direct chat function, and we would answer your questions there. Also, Andrew, if
Yes.
others who are perhaps not watching, who end up watching this not as a live broadcast, would like to ask questions, is there a way that we could get their questions to you?
Sure, I can be emailed. I'm willing to share my address. That is SCHU. No, that is 421 SCHU at Comcast.net. Sorry, 421. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit over here yet. I'm taking a deep breath. My email address, which is of course something I should know much better than I am demonstrating now, is 421 SCHU at Comcast.net. Okay, so that's 421 SCHU at Comcast.net. Thank you.
Wonderful. Here's one question. Do you believe that a rapid single note ornament ever existed in practice?
Yes, I do. For example, if one looks at the ornamentation that the castrato Farinelli used in an opera aria about 100 years after the period that we're talking, that is also available online, one sees that he has written, so he is using a written out type of ornamentation that I think is very exciting and a very good thing. But when it comes to interpreting the trill or trying to put in a cadential ornament just on that one pitch, I don't think it works. But yes, I think there are places in the singing repertoire where such an effect is acceptable and can be very exciting.
We had someone ask for a list of the books you mentioned, and what we'll do is I will have Andrew send me a list, and then I will put those into the description of the YouTube video that we will post on our YouTube channel, as well as on our website. If you would like them in particular, you can email me and I can send them to you directly after I have them. And my email address is specialprojects@earlymusicamerica.org, or you can use us contact EMA function at earlymusicamerica.org, and we will make sure that anyone who needs it can have the list of books and treatises that were mentioned today.
Yes, and I would be very happy to include a listing of those dictionaries and of the treatises that I cited today, as well as some other things that I did not. Sure.
Any other questions?
May I make a correction about my email address? It is indeed SCHU421 at Comcast.net.
The other way around. Okay.
Yeah.
And I will put that into the chat for anyone who is joining us. SCHU421 at Comcast.net. Wonderful.
That's it.
Well, I don't see any other questions, but thank you all for joining us this afternoon. If you have a moment and you have the means, we once again ask for you to consider a donation to the Early Music Relief Fund, which is helping early musicians in need during this time. 100% of donations are going to the musicians. Early Music America and Gotham Early Music Scene are not keeping any of that money. Right now, the application is closed until such time as we have enough funds to reopen it to issue another round of relief funds. But if you have the opportunity, we would love for you to help these musicians. You can go to earlymusicamerica.org, and in the banner at the top, you can find the We Are Early Music Relief Fund campaign from there. Oh, we did have another question.
Yes.
Why, Nicholas asks, why was Caccini not more precise on the fact that it had to be sung on 2 notes? Why do you?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think because by the time Caccini was writing about it, it was already an ornament that people were using. And so therefore, we are dealing with, again, a convention. This is how people would write it out. This is not necessarily what people would hear. And then, again, he indicates that the writing it out as a repetition on one pitch is a way for someone to learn how to gain the musculature, shall we say, the ability to be able to sing the real trill, which would then be more than just a narrow one-note kind of event.
Wonderful.
You should not take what is supposed to be an exercise for the development of muscular coordination in order to sing a real trill as being the trill itself.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions right now. So I'd just like to thank Andrew Schultze. Thank you for presenting today. There are many treatises and sources to go back over and to look in detail at everything that you had to say. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for including me in this very august series of events. Thank you. And thank you all for coming to hear me.
And we invite you to join us once again next Monday. That is the beginning of May, where we will have Dorian Bandy, who will be speaking about Mozart's improvisations. And then the following week, we'll actually return to discussions of salons with Elizabeth Winefield. And you can find more information about that on our website, earlymusicamerica.org. Thank you all for joining us on Facebook Live and on Zoom. And for Early Music America, we'll see you next week.